Thank you all for attending. I'm a little bit at a disadvantage for a couple reasons. One, because I am following Rick Grigsby. I'm not a motivational speaker. And two, because you all just had lunch. So, I'll do my best to keep you awake. If you notice your neighbor falling asleep, just kind of nudge them so they don't drool. We do have a camera, and we're going to look for people falling asleep. So take care of one another. First, I want to thank APHA staff, Billy Smith, and the EC for recognizing that these forums are beneficial to directors, members, leaders of the APHA. To get us started, to give us a little bit of perspective of who's in the room, by show of hands, if you're an APHA director or alternate director, please raise your hand. Please keep your hands raised if you are compensated for those volunteer responsibilities. And I don't mean reimbursed for expenses, I mean paid for that job. Okay? And one more time, raise your hand if you're also involved at the regional level as a regional club officer or director. Keep your hands raised if you're compensated for those volunteer responsibilities. So, we're not here for the money. No. People are motivated to volunteer for different reasons. We'll talk about that as it relates to both recruiting and retention a bit later. I'm David Lands, alternate director for Area 8, Virginia and West Virginia, the Virginia Paint Horse Club president, first vice president of the Virginia Horse Council, and board member of the Virginia Horse Industry Board. So what do I do for a living? Because none of those pay me. In January, I assumed command of the 192nd Intelligence Squadron of the Virginia Air National Guard. That's probably a little bit more interesting. No. I'm not presenting this information based on personal success with volunteer management, recruiting, retention, or recognition. I'm presenting it based on the fact that I realize in all of those things I just mentioned that I deal with volunteers, even the military. Conscription and the draft went out with the Vietnam War. Every one of our military members serving today do it voluntarily. So there is a lot of information available, research on the web, books, that tell us about volunteer management, how to recruit them, how to retain them, how to recognize them. So much, in fact, that it was hard to bring all of it in and put it in a concise format for you to at least grasp enough to say, yeah, that makes sense. Take away a few things to make things better, either at the regional club level or at APHA national level. There is a list of references, the last slide, so if you want to take notes, write them down, but we're going to load the entire presentation to the regional club website. Hopefully we'll leave here with fresh perspective and a renewed effort to consider how volunteers enable APHA and regional clubs to accomplish our mission. We'll start with why volunteers are important to APHA. So it's how we get things done. We just identified that very little paid staff, if any. We're basically all volunteer clubs, every position, officers, directors, committee members, committee chairs. If we're going to succeed in finding our replacements, it has to become a strategic proposition. We have to think about things before they start happening. If we're not prepared for someone to, in my case, take my place as the president of the Virginia Paint Horse Club, I can only juggle so many things. So at some point, something's got to give. We only have so much time, we only have so much energy. Hopefully, my goal is to find somebody that is willing and then prepare them to actually succeed me in that role. It makes sense that it might be the vice president. Sometimes that doesn't make sense. Sometimes they're not the right person. If we continue with the reactive approach, and by that I mean wait till somebody is at the point, their breaking point, and they have to go and say, I just can't take it anymore, something's got to give, I got to stop, then we're not going to be successful. Zero transition plus zero training equals negative progress. You won't even maintain the level of progress you currently have. You will go backwards. I would ask you to consider forming a board development committee. And by that I mean having a group of people, and maybe it's only 2 or 3, that part of their charge or charter is to consider how are the board members doing? And when are we going to get to a point where we need to bring in more board members? How do we prepare people to be board members? What training do we have to provide? How much transition time do we have to allow? How do we get there? How the 3 components of recruiting, retention, and recognition work together is pretty much why we're here and what I hope you walk away with. There's 3 things I want you to think about, and actually because of Rick's discussion yesterday, I added a 4th. The 3 are basically a proactive strategic planning initiative at the local club level. Asking people to sponsor or mentor new members and or new potential volunteers, because that's where they come from. Make it somebody's responsibility, or a lot of somebody's responsibility. Establish a volunteer recognition program, or at the very least, a volunteer coordinator. We recognized some APHA directors for tenure this morning. I'd be surprised to know how many regional clubs recognize their officers or directors for tenure, or for anything for that matter. And I'm not being critical. So please consider those things. So to give you a graphic representation, recruiting, retention, recognition. And so that just illustrates their how do they affect volunteerism? We can look at the literal approach. If we consider their relationships to one another and how they work together or don't work together, it's interesting. So if we rotate that diagram and put recognition on the top, I would propose that recognition affects both recruiting and retention. We're all starting from a point of we have boards, we have officers, so we need to retain the ones we have, or get rid of the ones that don't fit. And that's a reality. And I know that's hard to do sometimes. Rick mentioned yesterday people's fear of conflict. It's fearful for a lot of people, but sometimes it's more damaging to allow somebody that doesn't fit to stay in place than it is to just bite the bullet and let them go, gracefully, hopefully. So anybody, remind me the 3 R's of education back in the day. What? Just reading, writing. Right, okay, so in this case, as it relates to volunteerism, recruiting, retention, and recognition. I think recognition, if we look at it a little bit differently, as the bottom of a pyramid, based on the fact that it's the foundation for how we retain and or recruit existing or new potential volunteers. Should recognition be our primary consideration? Does it enable both of the others? If we don't effectively recognize or appreciate existing volunteers, will our ability to retain them diminish? I think so. If we fail at recognition, won't it also negatively affect our ability to recruit new volunteers? New potential volunteers see how we do or don't appreciate existing volunteers. So they do kind of work together. Recognition is the foundation that facilitates both of the others. So moving into recruiting, who are we looking for specifically? Members, new and existing. Billy, you don't mind I say we need new members, do you? I figured you'd be okay with that. How about members that are no longer involved? You probably have data of members that maybe were involved 2 or 3 years ago and just haven't renewed, or we broke communication with them. Reach out to them. Ask them why they're not involved. How about past officers or board members? In some cases, maybe you don't want them back, and that's okay too. But for the ones that you might, just reach out to them and have a discussion. Initiate a, hey, if you don't know why they left and you want them back, why did you leave? What were some of the things, what were some of the reasons? Hopefully things have improved and you can ask them to maybe recommit to to the mission of the regional club. We can look to industry for potential members or additional volunteers. We all have supporting organizations, service providers, industry leaders. A list scrolls to the top just to give you some initial thoughts. So there was nothing I could find about volunteerism for a horse organization. Imagine that. But we can take the information that we did find and relate it specifically to what we do. All we have to do is think about what we do, how we do it, who we need to do it, and we're pretty much there. I would also say, don't forget, please consider discipline-specific options. So we had representatives from NRHA here, NSBA here this weekend. Why not involve them? Chances are we haven't asked them. I know I haven't. But there are organizations in your area. There's a Virginia Reining Horse Association. I've met the president, but I haven't asked him for help. Why not? I think it's a partnership waiting for us to make happen. So what do we need? We need volunteers committed to our success, our mission. Specifically, officers and board members, committee members, chairs, people to do administrative work. We need leaders. You don't have to come from a horse background to be a leader of a horse organization. I think it helps, but we need leaders. And you're here because you're all leaders. But we need to find more. We need to find some to replace us. Also considering function-specific volunteers for show duties, trail rides, trail ride organizers, award committees, and I would again say volunteer recognition committee, volunteer development committee, consider that too. Where, when and where do we recruit? Just like looking for members, it needs to be all the time. Continuous, perpetual, every opportunity we get. We have many club-sponsored events. If we aren't asking for help, not many people are going to come forward and offer it. Some will. Consider yourself lucky when they do. Most won't. If you can tell them what you need and be specific, you can get their interest. You can gain their support. You might have to ask more than once. But if you don't ask at all, I pretty much guarantee they won't help. At some of those industry gatherings, expos, auctions, sales, trail rides, open shows, it's easy to engage horse people in conversation. So we go to expos, set up a Virginia Paint Horse Club booth, have some APHA information there, have some club information there, and people that have paint horses can't wait to talk about them. I have a paint horse, and so you engage them by saying, well, tell me about your horse, and be ready to sit down for a little bit. And that's a good thing, because it really is easy to get their attention. Just ask them, tell me about your horse. It'll work from there. So, how do we recruit? Communication is absolutely how we do it. There's multiple ways of doing it. I propose that the personal invitation is absolutely the best. So that's going to require you to get to know somebody, and that's okay. I don't think there's very many shy people in this room. We all have communication venues within our clubs. Email, newsletters, social media. Warning, social media. So I would appeal to you to keep social media interaction as professional as possible. I believe Billy mentioned it last year, but my concern typically comes revolved around what I consider, forgive me, sport bitching. People bitching for the sport. They don't like something, and it's appropriate and applicable. So really, think about it. Sometimes they don't necessarily. It can be. I didn't want to memorialize it by putting it on the screen, but But we are recording this, so if you need to cut that out, just... What I would say is attempt to identify it as soon as possible and as tactfully as you can. Basically ask somebody, if you have a problem, come to us with a solution. Don't just raise an issue and then, so I'm pulling the pin on a grenade, I'm throwing it in the middle of the table, and I'm backing up to see how it goes. And that happens every single day. Oh, I want to see how many likes I get for my sport bitching. In addition to social media, we have industry publication outlets. There's some other tools available. It's important that we ask our existing volunteers to get involved and find other volunteers, or make it personal and say, find your replacement. Who's going to replace you when you get tired, or you get exhausted, or all the balls you're juggling start to fall? Who's going to take your place? If we're responsible for developing our own replacement, chances are we'll have really good transition. Ask current volunteers to find new volunteers. Very key in both recruiting and retention is making sure you have a discussion about expectations. So expectations management, what does it mean? You want me to do this? Okay, you can tell me what it means, what I want to do. Yep. How often do you meet? Where do you meet? What medias? How do you get together? Is it teleconference? Is it always face-to-face? Is it once a month? Is it every other month? Is it once a quarter? Where do you do it? Do you do it all over the state so that it's convenient for some in this quarter and convenient for these others in this quarter? Do you do it in a central location? What is it going to cost me financially and time? Because I would say there's no more precious commodity to anybody in this room above their time. If you initiate that relationship with expectations, it will succeed. Because they will have an opportunity to say, no thanks, that's more than I can do. Or, thank you for letting me know, I'm ready to jump in with both feet. But you won't have a conversation 6 months down the road and say, I didn't realize you needed this much from me, I can't do it. Because now you've wasted a lot of time. So a little bit of data to help us. I mentioned that word of mouth or personal invitation I think is the best. And of course I said that and then I showed you the data. I'm not that smart. The data told me the answer. The other item on here I think that will work best for us is events. Because we all have events, multiple events. So as we consider volunteer retention, I need a volunteer, pun intended. Yep. Somebody, anybody, and we have a microphone if you don't think you're loud enough to tell us, share with us your motivation or why you got involved originally. Either at the national level, club level, it doesn't matter. What was your motivation?
I'm nosy.
Can you get that?
That's exactly why I got involved.
You want information. Information.
The need for information and you're nosy. Okay, so my follow-up question is, has your motivation changed?
No, I'm still nosy.
So I think we got Renee for life. Did someone else want to? Yes, probably.
I got involved because if you're not, well, none of this doesn't have to do with APHA, it's with another association I'm involved in, but if you're not happy with a piece of something, get involved to help fix it, change it, and make a difference.
It's Sunday, so I'm going to give you an amen. Absolutely. And I think that's more closely to why I got involved.
Yeah.
I wanted to participate, and I didn't necessarily, I thought there was a lot more potential than what I saw initially, and said, well, okay, if we want to make a difference, we might have to dedicate some resources to do it. So now that that's why you got involved, how's your motivation changed to stay?
Well, I'm very much, I love all of this, so I will definitely stay. Like, that's
So
not.
part of it's the
good.
relationships you've made,
Absolutely.
and I would say part of it's because you decided to get involved and make things better, you want it to succeed.
Right, and that was for my local club. Let me also say that when I first got involved, it's been about 4 years now, and I'd done this a long time ago, and I'm in the businesses as well, as you know, that I never found a more welcoming group of people than in our zone. I tell the story about a second horse show, they all knew my name. They didn't need to know me from Adam, but they made a point of knowing who I was and saying, so glad to see you today. Like, I'm a nervous wreck at the horse show, you know, and they're coming up and going, so glad to see you today. We're so happy you're here. That made all the difference in the world to me. I was
Right.
like, now I'm like, have 3 horses, not 1.
And that's
Crazy
personal
woman.
interaction, and Billy, she's reaching your goal.
Yeah, there you go.
More horses, more people.
So, you're stuck.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. I think we all probably have similar reasons or similar motivations. And the point here is we have to consider what they are. And the only way to consider what they are is to ask. And it's okay to ask, especially if someone's volunteering and you haven't asked them. Okay, that's great. What do you want to do? What do you hope to accomplish? What do you need from me? What's your motivation? For some, for a lot of them, it's new skills. Some people want to try something they haven't done before, and volunteering is a great way to do it, especially if you've got somebody there that's experienced. So if you want to try your hand at being a newsletter editor, that's a pretty low threat place to get involved. And we all need help with newsletters. Every one of us. We need people to contribute, we need people to help with layout, we need pictures, we need help. That's a really easy way to start. Website manager, show manager, there's some other typical horse-specific stuff as well. Or it's perhaps a new interest. They want to get experience to add to their resume, to find another job, or just build a college resume, or build a high school resume to get into college. If we don't do a better job recruiting and retaining our youth, this organization won't live. It can't, and it applies to all organizations. We have to engage them. And friends, and networking. Especially friendly people. What about training? Especially if we've got somebody that does something and they're interested in learning Robert's Rules of Orders, or how does that process work? Well, the best way to learn about it is to actually experience it, or read about it. I would say an effective means of helping people in those situations, so motivated to learn new things or try new things, would be to consider pairing them with somebody kind of as a shadow or an intern relationship. Hey, let's work together, we'll do this task, and maybe you watch me do it a couple times and then you got it. Go on, have fun. So when we look at the right environment, Rick Rigsby spent 4 hours yesterday talking to us about creating a culture of trust. He didn't say it when he started, but he said it by the time he finished. And if we're going to be successful retaining volunteers, so the ones that we currently have and ones that we hope to recruit, we better make sure we have an effective team volunteer environment. We have a common purpose. We all have the same mission. Mission creep, you mentioned it Friday morning. We have to remain focused on what that mission is. We have to remind ourselves. I would say maybe we have to, every time we get together, read it before we start meeting. Why are we here? It kind of puts it in perspective. And then every great idea that comes up, and I know there's a lot of them, you bounce it off of, well, is that further our mission? Is that going to help us get to wherever it is we think we need to be going? We have to establish trust. If we have, on our regional club boards, if we have small fractions of cliquish behavior with some people that have been there for 20 years, and then we bring in new folks, and then there's whispering, and then there's backstabbing, and then there's trust issues. And I promise you the easiest way to get rid of a new volunteer is to shut them down. Hey, well, what about this? We tried that, it didn't work. Okay, I'll stop talking. You just shut me down. I'm done. Thanks for coming. Clarify roles and responsibilities. What does it mean by position for each person in the organization? What does the president do, vice president, secretary, treasurer? What do the committees do? What does it mean to be a committee chair? If people understand, number one, what you want them to do, and then number two, what everybody else is doing, they at least know, how do I fit in to the organization? What's my role? And then how can my role help facilitate some of the other roles? But you have to know what they are or it's not going to work. Communicate openly and effectively. No secrets. No personal agendas. It kills trust and ultimately an organization. Appreciate diversity. I can't believe I have to say that to a bunch of paint horse people. But just like no paint horse is alike, no person is alike. And we all have different experiences. We all have different backgrounds. We all bring something different to the table to collectively get to our mission or our goals. We should embrace and appreciate that. It's definitely about building a culture and a team environment, and trust, it revolves around trust. So, retention, experiences critical to volunteer retention specifically. Try to match tasks with skills. The only way for you to know what someone's skills are is either to ask for a resume. I think there's a rule tomorrow that talks about new directors providing a resume or not being considered. Okay, why wouldn't we ask at the club level for the same thing? Tell me what you're good at, tell me what you've done, tell me why you want to be here. If we can match up their skills to a need of the organization, it's going to be a great relationship. If we fail to do that, it will not be good. It won't work out well, and it probably won't be a very long-lived relationship. And I know it's tough. Not everybody has skills that directly apply to what we need. People with skills, I'm trying to find the word, horse trainers. Kidding, that is a joke. Don't shoot me. That was supposed to be funny. Didn't work out. Opportunities to share experiences with other volunteers. So we get together, and we're all busy, I know, and we have club meetings, but think about some other activities that really aren't getting down to business and going through an agenda and getting from number 1 to number 4 and maybe choking down something to eat, and then I gotta go back home. But how about some activities that really aren't maybe business related? This whole weekend is business related, but we also have opportunity to get together after the meetings to maybe have dinner or drinks or breakfast. So if we try to find ways and schedule ways for that to happen, we'll have successful volunteers that are happy to be with us and happy to participate and engage. We have to support them. How do we support them? Number one, we let them know that we care about their success. That we try to provide training for them. And it doesn't need to be extravagant training, but this, what Rick Rigsby did yesterday, a lot better than this, is training. It is training. So why not offer up to our volunteers the ability to come and learn about something new? We have to communicate with them as many possible ways as we can. I know, because I have children, that texting is, I can't keep up with it, but that's how they communicate. So we have to appreciate the fact that as we find new volunteers, that is going to continue to happen. That's not new, it's not a fad, it's not going away. So we communicate in sound bites. Blah, 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 done. Send. But we need a little bit more than that, especially if we want to keep them engaged. It's okay to call someone on the phone, have a little chat. People still like to talk on the phone. Actually, some won't even text or use email. If you don't call them, you don't talk to them. Welcome and respect volunteers. It still kind of goes back to an environment or culture of trust, but you have to respect the fact that Yep, they're new, they're different, they have fresh ideas. It's okay. They might not all be good, but maybe there's some you haven't considered before. You have to appreciate them, and you have to make them feel welcome. The cliquish part won't make them feel welcome. Whispering secrets, did you hear about? Oh, what about? That will destroy trust. It'll destroy the culture. And it's our responsibility to make sure that they feel welcome. Members and volunteers. And I kind of use those synonymously because where are our volunteers going to come from? Members. New, old, existing, good, gone, bad. It's really important to consider not letting people burn out. Avoiding the point where they stop dropping the balls that they're juggling. Avoiding the point where they come to the realization that I'm giving up too much for these volunteer activities and I'm not paying enough attention to maybe the job that pays me or the wife and kids that take care of me. And if we let it get to that point, it's probably too late. So that personal communication and that open dialogue will go a long way towards someone feeling comfortable enough to tell you, hey, drowning, can't swim, can't breathe underwater, somebody help. Threshold for burnout for volunteers is a lot less than paid staff. Because I can put up with a lot of stuff, especially if I'm getting paid. But when it comes down to something I'm just giving my time freely, no. We're all pretty much wired that way. Provide clear expectations. I mentioned it earlier relative to recruiting, and I also mentioned it's important for retention. Because if they know what they're getting into when they come in, there's no question about it when you want them to stay. If expectations change, you need to have a conversation about it. If their availability to volunteer changes, hopefully they'll bring it to you. Ensure what you're asking them to do is meaningful, at least at some level. Help people understand how what they do fits into the overall mission of the club or the association. If people understand my role, how I fit, then chances are they're going to stay, especially if it's meaningful to them, or to the organization, or to the kids, or to whatever is meaningful to them. It's not the same for every person. Make communication personal. Reach out. Sit down. Have a cup of coffee. Pick up the phone. Email works, but it's less personal. Email keeps us in touch. It doesn't really allow us to explore or build on a relationship. It just doesn't. Face-to-face is always great, but we live all over the country or the world. Recognition. The easiest thing to do is to say thank you and mean it. But what we have to do is do it more often. Formally, informally, we have to recognize people and appreciate them and what they do more frequently. One of the best things to do, especially for some of us that have been doing this for 10, 12, 20, 30 years, is rotate responsibilities. Be the secretary or treasurer for a term or two, and then try your hand at being the vice president for a term or two, or back up and just be a director for a term or two, or just stop for a little while. Stay involved, but back out of the leadership capacity. Recharge your battery. Learn something new. Take more time for whatever it is you want to, but change it up a little bit. I kind of mentioned already, ensure the experience is worthwhile. So find out what is meaningful to them and make sure that whatever it is you're asking them to do is at least meeting their expectation. It's important to talk to them before you kind of ask them for help. It's important to try to determine what they're good at or what they're maybe not so good at, but you got somebody that's really good at it and you can put them together and they can both be good at it. That's perfect for everybody. Training and professional development opportunities. This convention is a training and personal development opportunity. So it's easy for me to say this, but next year, all the Virginia Paintworks Club people, volunteers, are going to be at convention. It's kind of in Virginia. So that was easy. But that's what really made me think about it. Is that valuable to them? I think it'll be very valuable to them. I think it'll be great for them to see how the business of APHA gets done. I think it'll be great for them to meet you and talk to you about their horse. They're going to talk about their horse. And if you think they're shy, just ask them. So tell me about your horse. But I think this is a great opportunity for training, personal development. Allocate sufficient resources to support them. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to pay them, but maybe in some cases you get together and have meetings, and maybe you buy them lunch or breakfast, or when you ask them to volunteer for an expo, you provide food, or you give them time off and they get to go, if it's a state fair, hey, go ride some rides and have fun, come back, we'll need you again in 3 hours. Or bring your family, hang out for half the day, and then we'll cover it, and then come help us for the other half of the day. Recognition activities. So we're back to the one that I think applies best to both recruiting and retention. All volunteers want to know they're valuable, and we don't take what they do for us for granted. It's kind of the same way with our families. Exactly the same. We, as leaders, have a responsibility to recognize their work and let them know that it's appreciated. If we don't, the only thing keeping them there is, I really don't know. Sometimes it's being nosy. But you know what? I appreciate you being nosy, because that's why you're there, and that's okay. As we do it, make it a priority. Make it something that you, at least from this point forward, think about a little bit more often than you do now. And that's not hard to do. APHA recognizes performance in a lot of different ways. I just don't think we extrapolate that down to the volunteers that make all that happen. And we should. Rookie of the Year, how about Volunteer of the Year? It's kind of easy, we just have to do it. We have to commit to doing it. It's the right thing to do. Recognizing their accomplishments affects both retaining them as well as recruiting others. I mentioned it earlier, just more support for it. I mentioned when we started, considering designating somebody specifically responsible for recognizing your volunteers. Make it an official duty, if you will. Make it part of the awards committee. It's really not that hard to do. It's, if we ask somebody to do it and we tell them, hey, look, we just want to make sure that we don't forget to do this. It won't take a lot of effort, and it won't cost a lot of money. We just have to do it. And I know we're all prideful, and it's hard. You don't want to be the one that says, we need a volunteer program, because you don't want all of your volunteers to think that you don't feel appreciated. So it's a little bit of a catch-22, but I think if you present it in a way that they understand, it's not about me. It really isn't. It's about you. We want to do this for you. We want to do it for the organization. We want it to succeed for the long term. Do it often. It's going to be really easy to do it more often than you've done lately, because we don't do it very often. So guess what? You're going to make immediate progress like that. It should happen on a year-round, frequent, every opportunity you get kind of basis. Informal, formal, the easiest way is to say thank you, look somebody straight in their eye, shake their hand, give them a hug, and thank them. It's not hard to do. It costs you nothing. And it means a lot to people. And for most people, that's really all they need. But for bringing in new volunteers, they probably need to see more than that, because that is a very personal thing. It's the best way to get them, and it's the best way to keep them. Do it in different ways. I'm going to bring up another one because that sounded bad.
You just got it?
I'm glad you got it. So vary the efforts, vary how you do it. Informal, spontaneous, as well as formal. And I think we do that pretty well. We probably all have year-end awards banquets, and we probably all thank our volunteers when we do it. But it needs to be more than that. It needs to be more than once a year. It needs to be at every opportunity. Be sincere. And that was kind of looking somebody in the eye, making sure they understand how it's important to you or to the organization. Make it meaningful. Seize the opportunity to reflect on their value, their personal value. So we talked about how do they fit in. Well, help them understand not only how they fit in, but what they do and how it's integral to your mission, our mission. What does it mean? Why is it important? Why do we need you to do it? Recognize the person, not the work. So it's one thing to say, that is a great program, thank you very much. Yeah, it's a great program because I did it. Okay, let's rephrase that. Thank you. You are awesome. You made that program what it is. The club's going to benefit. The entire zone's going to benefit. Thank you so much for what you do. There's a big difference in thanking somebody specifically versus thanking their or appreciating their accomplishment. And both can be done, just don't forget to thank the person. So it's, you did a great job versus that's a great job. It makes it, again, it makes it personal. Make it appropriate to the achievement. So be careful setting expectations you can't fulfill later. A paper certificate of appreciation might be great if someone helps you with a short-term task program. Dinner, banquet, engraved plaque, trophy, ribbon, belt buckle for a milestone that's much further out. Just remember that if you have a banquet or dinner for volunteers this year, the ones that are watching are going to expect you to do it next year, and the next year, and the next year.
This year and next year.
Be consistent, and that speaks to some of the making sure that we recognize similar accomplishments or similar achievements with similar appreciation. It's the making sure we can do it this year and next year and next year. Be timely. It's most effective when you have an opportunity to thank somebody as soon as possible after their accomplishment. The longer it waits, the more less sincere or less meaningful it is. And so another little paint horse theme, make it unique. The best way to make it unique is to make sure you understand a few things about the volunteer. What motivates them? What kind of recognition or appreciation would they like? Some people absolutely do not want to be the center of attention. And if you know that, don't put them there. Some might not publicly want to be recognized for what they do. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't show our appreciation or recognize them in some other manner. But if we don't know them, if we don't have a personal relationship with them, we probably won't be successful making it unique. Get to know what they like, what they don't like, what they do outside of horses. Maybe you can recognize them in a manner that you've never thought of because we're stuck and it's all about the horses. You'll learn best how to do it by building a personal relationship with them. And that's the most unique little thing I could do with the words. So. I will, what time is it? 2. Okay, so only 10 minutes for questions. We actually have a microphone if you don't think it's on. Are there any questions or anything you want to add to the information? Yes.
What are some, say, your own individual clubs that you use to accomplish these 3 goals?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
What are some specific examples of things that you personally do, with your club does to accomplish?
Well, see, and you didn't come in late, did you? Oh. Okay, so not to alienate you, but when I started the discussion, I tried to explain. I'm not doing it because I think we're really good at it. I'm doing it because I think we need to improve. So even within our club, because I know I appreciate the help that everybody gives us, but I know we don't have a proactive approach for making sure that we look for new volunteers, appreciate the ones we got, and make sure that we have a plan in place when they start leaving, that we can have enough to keep going with our mission. So I don't have a good answer. I do write personal notes. At our awards banquet this year, and sorry they weren't APHA notes, I just didn't have them. But just a personalized thank you note. And it wasn't a lot. It was really just thank you for the time and energy and your contribution to the success of this organization. And that's it. But I gave one to every one of our board members. And I gave one to my wife. And I gave one to my kids. Because they do share me. And they don't necessarily like it. Yes?
But I will add, because David is sometimes not good at tooting his own horn, that one specific thing that we've done recently that I thought was fantastic and took advantage of the synergy of the different equine, I think it took advantage of the synergy that you can create among the equine organizations within your area, your state. We have a very fantastic volunteer that runs our stallion sale for our breeders' futurity. It's been a growing program. It's been fabulous. And David took the time to nominate her for recognition by the Virginia Horse Council. So she got to go to the annual reception there. She got a beautiful glass award to recognize her for her efforts for not only what she's doing for the Paint Horse Club, but what she's doing for horses in the whole state of Virginia. And it was a very positive experience, I think, for everybody on our board.
And that's a really good point. So pretty sure within your club, states, zones, regions, you've got industries that want to recognize horsemen and horsewomen. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. Because almost every state has a horse council. And almost every one of those horse councils want to promote the industry within their state. So probably with smartphones, you could do a little research and find out that there's some things that your volunteers, your members, your officers have done that are worthy of recognition. And that is good for both your organization as well as the paint horse breed, especially within a state that isn't maybe as familiar with paints as they are with other breeds. And I found that in Virginia. Until I got involved at that, I'll say state level, paints, pintos, whatever. They didn't know. It wasn't even part of their vocabulary. It is now. It is now. And that's a good thing. Any other questions? I know we're close to out of time. Yes?
Well, I would just say that one of the things that our club does out in Washington State is we produce, which I know a lot of states and or other entities produce your own little directory every year, because I see them, Oklahoma Club does it, a lot of clubs do it. We recognize our Member of the Year, Youth of the Year, and Rookie of the Year in that with their picture and everything.
And I think that's great. I would just ask you to add a volunteer of the year. I think that's wonderful. And it's not to say that we don't do it, I'm just making sure that we think about it a little bit more than maybe we have in the past. And maybe make a category specific for volunteers. There's probably some information you can get off the web that will even give you the criteria for what you want to base some of that on. It shouldn't be that difficult. Okay, yes,
You
ma'am.
can even call them unique titles, like I've heard Pat on the Back Award. Or something like that, and I'm done.
You are slow, Anna.
So what she referenced was coming up with a unique name or title, like Pat on the Back Award. And that's a good point, because we can always appreciate and recognize, and we do a pretty good job of show volunteers, because we're there and we're thinking about it and we're giving out awards, but I just don't know that we do a great job with the core group of leaders that lead our organizations. So thank you all for attending, and I hope you enjoyed it.